Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX. Well, let's take a look at some of the top stories. A 2-year-old toddler was found dead in the rubble after a Russian drone and missile attack on Kyiv, bringing the death toll to 31 people, including 3 children. Over 159 people were wounded, with the attack involving more than 300 drones and 8 missiles, according to President Volodymyr Zelensky. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that he hopes Ukraine peace talks will continue through working groups, but stressed that Russia's goals remain unchanged. Speaking ahead of a U.S. ceasefire deadline set by President Donald Trump, this comes as Russian forces claim to have captured Chasiv Yar, a claim that Ukraine denies. President Donald Trump's tariff deadline has passed, setting a 35% rate on Canada and 25% on India. With tariffs rising from the 10% baseline, Asia shares fall while Mexico gets a 90-day extension, and copper and de minimis imports face changes. U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff became the first high-profile American official to visit Gaza since the war began, touring a U.S.-backed aid operation site that the United Nations says contributes to deadly conditions. Hours after his visit to a site in Rafah, Palestinian medics reported that Israeli forces shot dead 3 Palestinians near one of the foundation's locations. Meanwhile, France has begun airdropping 40 tons of humanitarian aid into Gaza, with President Emmanuel Macron urging Israel to open full humanitarian access. Foreign Minister Jean-Noel Barrot has said 4 flights from Jordan are delivering aid now, as global monitors warn of malnutrition and child deaths amid severe access restrictions. Cambodian Deputy Prime Minister Sun Chantol says they will nominate U.S. President Donald Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize for his role in halting a recent border conflict with Thailand. The nomination follows what Phnom Penh describes as Trump's direct intervention in easing tensions between the 2 Southeast Asian neighbors. Lebanon's health ministry said 4 people were killed in Israeli airstrike on southern Lebanon on Thursday. The Israeli military claimed the attack targeted Hezbollah infrastructure, including what Defense Minister Yoav Gallant called the group's biggest precision missile manufacturing site. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has said that the European Union will negotiate with the United States on steel export quotas to avoid excessive tariffs. The move follows a July trade deal with President Donald Trump's administration that imposed 15% tariffs on most products, while steel and aluminum remain subject to 50% duties. Russian President Vladimir Putin, during a visit to Valam Island with Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko, announced the delivery of the first batch of mass-produced Oreshnik ballistic missile systems to Russian forces. He also revealed that military experts are preparing deployment sites in Belarus, with full installation expected by year-end. Let's listen into what Russian president has said.
У нас произведен первый серийный комплекс «Орешника», первая серийная ракета. Да. И она поступила в войска. Теперь серия заработала. Первое. Второе. Наши специалисты, и белорусские военные специалисты, и российские, выбрали место для будущих позиций. И сейчас идет работа по подготовке этих позиций. Так что, скорее всего, мы до конца года, наши войска наступают по всей линии боевого соприкосновения. По всей. И в приграничной зоне, и в Донецкой республике, в Луганской, и в Запорожье, и в Херсоне. Везде, на всех участках, где-то больше, где-то меньше.
Putin confirmed that Russian troops are advancing along the front line in Ukraine. Despite the West's efforts to halt their progress, additionally, he claimed Russian forces had secured the town of Chasiv Yar in Donetsk region. Although Ukraine denies this, Putin reiterated his call for lasting and durable peace in Ukraine, insisting the conditions for peace remain unchanged. Let's listen into what Russian president has said.
Повторю еще раз, нам нужен длительный и прочный мир на хороших базовых основаниях, которые удовлетворяли бы и Россию, и Украину, обеспечили бы безопасность обеих стран. И, наверное...
Now we're joined by Irina Zuckerman. She is a senior journalist. She joins us live from New York. Thank you, Irina, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, can you tell us the background or history between Belarus and Russia? Why this timing? Why is Belarus hosting Russian military deployments now? And what does this add to this layer of to the conflict?
Since the Soviet Union has been a de facto colony of Moscow, just as with the other Soviet republics, it was essentially annexed and was treated as a lesser partner throughout the Soviet Union years. And after the breakdown of the Soviet Union, while it became a technically independent country, it remained a dictatorship, unlike many other post-Soviet states, not only within the Soviet Union proper, but also in the Eastern Europe. In general, it never underwent any sort of reforms. It retained the dictatorship by Lukashenko, who is an ally of Putin. At times he made statements trying to make himself appear somewhat more independent from Russia, but over Putin's tenure, specifically after the 90s, that attempts at independence have erased, and Lukashenko has become, at this point, he's nothing more than a puppet of Moscow.
And Irina, I would like to also ask, what does this deepening military cooperation between Russia and Belarus mean now for NATO and the broader geopolitical landscape in Eastern Europe?
Well, there's nothing new about Belarus hosting Russian forces. The post-Soviet dependency, shared authoritarian interests, economic coercion, and a very long-standing Russian security doctrine that views Belarus as a critical buffer zone against NATO are part of the story. Belarus is not simply willingly hosting Russian troops and equipment, but even nuclear weapons. The latest developments are a reflection of that close cooperation. Belarus is part of various Russian-led integration projects, including the Union State, the Collective Security Treaty Organization, and the Eurasian Economic Union. They are symbolizing Belarus' commitment to Moscow's sphere of influence. And Russia has incrementally gained influence over Belarusian military infrastructure, border policies, and even information systems. And after the 2020 Belarusian presidential elections, which many people regarded as fraudulent and which resulted in massive protests, Lukashenko faced the most serious challenge to his rule. The West responded with sanctions, diplomatic isolation, but Russia offered security guarantees, propaganda support, and economic bailouts, which decisively shifted Belarus away from any pretense of neutrality or multi-vector foreign policy and placed it squarely under Moscow's auspices. Lukashenko's political survival is now entirely dependent on Moscow, giving Putin enormous leverage to make increasingly broad military demands, which resulted in Russia deepening its military presence in Belarus over time. Joint exercises such as Zapad became more frequent. Infrastructure was built or repurposed to accommodate Russian forces permanently. Russia deployed troops, missile systems, and even surveillance capabilities long before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And Belarus effectively became a launch pad for Russian operations, attacks, and eventually the war. In fact, the initial failed assault on Kiev started in Belarus. It began from Belarusian territory Lukashenko's compliance is basically grounded in survivalist logic. Boosting Russian forces allows him to avoid domestic regime collapse, retaliatory Western action, or a potential coup. By embedding Russian troops and weapons, he guarantees continued Kremlin support while neutralizing internal dissent through repression and fear of a Russian-backed crackdown. He also wants to appear indispensable to Putin by portraying Belarus as a strategic asset. For Moscow,
Yes.
Belarus is essential as a geopolitical buffer, offering proximity to Poland, the Baltics, as well as Ukraine's north. It also serves as a test ground for military integration, missile deployments, and joint command structures. Moscow views Belarusian territory as part of the strategic depth needed to secure the Russian heartland and to project power westward. With nuclear-capable systems now reportedly being stationed in Belarus, it has become a forward base in Russia's hybrid confrontation with NATO, and Belarus is not merely an ally anymore, it's a de facto militarily integrated into Russia's defense posture.
Irina,
it's part of Russia for all intents and purposes.
Thank you so much, Irina, for sharing that with us and joining all the way from New York. Now, that was Irina Zuckerman. She's a senior journalist. Now we move on to our next news. In an interview, U.S. President Donald Trump has said that Washington is seeking ways to get people fed and improve conditions on the ground in Gaza. Trump has accused Hamas of stealing and reselling aid, but said that he had not yet been briefed by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff on his visit to a site run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. However, he still praised Witkoff's efforts and called them great work. The visit comes amid growing discussions around humanitarian assistance for Gaza. Witkoff has said that his visit to the American-backed aid station is a part of a broader effort to develop a plan to increase humanitarian aid deliveries to the Palestinian territory. Meanwhile, in Gaza, some Palestinians have said that they were cautiously optimistic about Witkoff's visit, while others were less hopeful. Let's listen in to what they had to say.
في حالنا احنا اولادنا بتموت من الجوع بننامش من الخوف ايش بدنا يعني جاي ايش يعمل هو انا مش فاهمه لحد الان جاي ايش يعمل جاي يعطينا اكل احنا كمان الامريكيه اللي بيحكوا عنها امريكيه ما شفناهاش بدنا يخلص الحرب بدناش احنا هذه الزيارات بس عشان يجيبوا لنا اكل ناكل
والله بنتمنى يكون في بوادر خير بزيادة لنا نتمنى من الله انه يوقف الحرب والمجاعة المأساوية يعني هو جاي يشوف انظار جاي يشوف كيف وضع غزة ان شاء الله بيشوف وضع غزة وصدق انه اهل غزة ميتين من الجوع فعليا ميتين.
Now we're joined by Ali M. Abushbak. He's a Middle East researcher, joins us live from Cairo. Thank you, Ali, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, despite some cautious optimism from Palestinians, others are also less hopeful about this impact of U.S. aid efforts. What does this reveal about the broader mistrust towards U.S.'s involvement in Gaza?
Thank you, Osama, for having me. In fact, this visiting, it's a controversial visit from Witkoff, especially he's leading the conversation between Hamas and Israel. And according to Palestinian, American as a mediator between Palestinian and Israel for peace process has lost its credibility and lost the trust from Palestinian. Especially America has a biasness with Israel and fully funded Israel in this current war and supporting Israel by the weapon and bombardment that Israel used to bomb the Palestinian in Gaza. Today morning, Witkoff, he visited the site of a humanitarian zone, and according to international law, according to human rights international organization, they describe it as the death trap for the Palestinian. More than 1,000 Palestinians have been killed. So also since the day one of Donald Trump during his official day in his office, he claimed that the war it will go to stop, and he obliged the Palestinian and Israelis community to stop the war and hold the war. in Gaza and reached to ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, but unfortunately he couldn't, and he failed for this duty. As the simultaneously also about the war in Ukraine and Russia, and today, yesterday, he gave a deadline for Putin to stop the war. I guess Donald Trump and this visiting helping Israelis community, helping Israelis government coalition and particularly Benjamin Netanyahu after the huge pressure from international community about the discrimination of humanitarian aid in Gaza and the crisis about the starvation in Gaza, while Israel claims that it's allowing for the humanitarian aid to into Gaza, and there is a still starvation in Gaza. Simultaneously, Israelis minister they deny the starvation in Gaza, and they consider what is happening on the ground. And this picture and footage have been leaked from Gaza. It's propaganda and AI generated, despite all the media. Forensic confirmed this picture and this footage is true and it's real from Gaza, not also has been used from previous conflict or from other from other zone conflict. So the things is this visit, it's meaningless. It's supporting Israel, and Donald Trump, his testimony and his statement about Witkoff is doing a great job, and yes, he's doing a great job just to support Israel, even not to support the desperate Palestinian and who's suffering from starvation and suffering from malnourished. So United Nations consider among 5 children from Gaza, one of them suffering from malnutrition in Gaza. So that situation is completely difficult on the ground, and we have seen the testimony of the resumed American soldier. He served in Gaza, what they call it, Gaza humanitarian function, and he considered, and he, according to his testimony, that Israel deliberately targeting the civilian. And Israel has the traditional excuses and justifying for its action on the ground, that Hamas using the Palestinian as a human shield. We have seen a several of picture that Israel is truth using the civilians in Gaza as a human shield, and there is no one proof or evidence about Israelis claims about Hamas using a human being in Gaza as a shelter. Same at the same time also, we have seen the aggression of the Israeli settlement in West Bank, which badly criticized from the international community. And on the ground situation, just now around 15 persons have been killed in Zakim corridor after the visit of Witkoff. 15 persons who seeking for collecting food in Gaza. The desperate people who are suffering from starvation, Israel have been targeting them and killing them in Zakim corridor in northern part of Gaza. So all of that supporting, and this visit supporting Israel, all of this testimony and the statement, it's only supporting Benjamin Netanyahu. And we have seen that Donald Trump, during the quote for Benjamin Netanyahu, he said, we are going to save Benjamin Netanyahu as we saved Israel after the war with Iran in last month.
Ali, thank you very much for sharing that. Thank you very much for joining us, Ali Bushbak, that's Middle East researcher. Now we move on to our next news. Thank you very much. The White House is doubling down on its trade stance, for a senior official says the U.S. can't tolerate one-sided trade relationships, pointing directly at Switzerland. According to the official, Bern refused to make meaningful concessions or drop barriers blocking U.S. goods. Tensions are rising globally as new tariffs take effect. In Serbia, the Chamber of Commerce warns that the U.S. tariffs will make its commercial positions difficult to maintain in American markets. Washington says these moves are part of a broader effort to rebalance trade and protect American industries. Critics warn it could spark deeper economic friction. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Irina Zuckerman. She's a senior journalist. She joins us live from New York. Thank you, Irina, for staying with us. Now, the White House has taken a hard stance on trade with Switzerland. How likely is that these tensions would escalate further, and what might this mean for U.S.-Swiss relations?
Well, it's definitely indicating a very radical shift from targeted protectionism, which was originally the goal of the Trump administration, to a much more sweeping economic assertiveness. The White House is framing this issue as not tolerating one-sided trade relationships, which is less a policy stand and more a very ideological return to transactional mercantilism, which defines bilateral relationships through immediate trade balance metrics rather than longer-term strategic alignment on systemic integration. Now, Switzerland has long been viewed as a stable, high-income, neutral country with limited trade friction, but it's been targeted due to its refusal to drop trade barriers, underlining a deeper structural problem in the current US tariff policy. Rather than focusing exclusively on predatory or state capitalist economies like China, the administration is expanding its economic confrontation to close partners who are unwilling to offer unilateral concessions. Trump had previously threatened EU, Canada, and Japan, which were leveraged in pursuit of symbolic political victories rather than tangible economic gain. In other words, while Trump can continue escalating against Switzerland and any number of other similar countries, it will not necessarily bring the economic gain Trump is hoping for. It will raise prices on Swiss products. It will create additional barriers to trade rather than lead to any sorts of unilateral concessions from Switzerland, and it will strain political and not just economic relations. Trump may continue doubling down. We have seen that he has already done so with Canada and even targeted smaller countries like Serbia, which are relatively negligible in the overall trade volume of the US. A lot of it is more about claiming victories in a zero-sum game view of that Trump has, both politically and economically, but we're also seeing prices go up on basic products, not just luxury products, which affects average Americans.
Yes, Irina, thank you very much for joining us and staying with us and sharing your insight as senior journalist. That was Irina Zuckerman with us from New York. Now we move on to our next news. The European Union has called for respect of a Bosnia appeals court ruling that upheld the conviction of Bosnian Serb leader Milorad Dodik. The decision, which bans Dodik from political office for 6 years, has sparked a crisis in the country. Dodik, who has long advocated for the Serb Republic's secession from Bosnia, vowed to defy the verdict. He also announced plans to seek support from Russia and US President Donald Trump. The court ruling follows Dodik's defiance of international peace envoy orders, and his actions have triggered one of the worst political crises in Bosnia since the 1990s. Conflict. Meanwhile, Dodik's legal team intends to appeal the decision. Now we are joined.
Ovo je udar na Republiku Srpsku, a oni žele da to personalizuju, da to Milorad Dodik. Dakle, ja nisam počinio nijedno krivično djelo predviđeno u zakonima Bosne i Hercegovine, a ovo krivično djelo koje je kao navodno propisao Schmidt ja ne prihvatam i odbijam da je to moguće da se uopšte uradi, prihvati.
Now for this discussion, we are joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute, joining us live from Tokyo, Japan. Thank you, Dr. Satoru, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, can you tell us who is Dodik and why is he seeking support from Russia and US? What is his connection?
He is a Srpska Republic, the president of the Srpska Republic. The Srpska Republic is part of the Bosnia-Herzegovina, but originally this was established by the Serbian people when the Bosnia-Herzegovina declared independence from the Yugoslavia. So that time this was ethnic conflict. So Serbian people do not want to belong to Muslim lead or the ethnic lead Bosnia. So that's why they declared independence as a Srpska Republic. But after that Dayton Agreement and end conflict in Bosnia-Herzegovina, that time the Srpska Republic is integrated with the other part, the Bosnia-Herzegovina. So even if they originally they seek the independence from the Bosnia-Herzegovina, then now they are the part of the Bosnia-Herzegovina. Despite this, the new president, start to separate, start to seek something the original policy of this republic. So this Mr. Dodik's effort is something separatist. Part. So this means that this is a provocation to create a new ethnic conflict in the Bosnia-Herzegovina. So that's why the Bosnia-Herzegovina side tried to cracking down his movement. And so from the EU, this is understandable because the ethnic conflict is a real threat for Bosnia-Herzegovina because a multi-ethnic country now. So that's why how to maintain the integrated country as a Bosnia-Herzegovina is a matter. And in this case, such kind of activity led by the president of the Srpska Republic is a problem. Well, that's what happened.
Thank you very much, Dr. Satoru Nagao, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we move on. Poland has signed a new contract to acquire additional K2 Black Panther battle tanks from South Korea, reportedly further strengthening its defense ties with Seoul. The deal, confirmed by Polish defense officials, is part of Warsaw's ongoing efforts Korean industrial and defense group Hyundai Rotem for the supply of battle tanks as Poland and NATO allies look to beef up their defenses following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Poland, which borders Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus, has allocated 4.7% of gross domestic product to boosting its armed forces in 2025, with a pledge to increase to 5% in 2026. The latest agreement to buy 180 tanks, latest order will be produced at a plant in Gliwice in southern Poland owned by Bumar Labedny. The first deliveries of tanks to Poland are planned for the next year, and Polish production is planned for 2028 to 2030. Moreover, the agreement signed also covers the delivery of support of vehicles and a training service and repair package. Here's what the Polish and South Korean defense ministers had to say.
Polska zyskuje zdolności do produkcji czołgów dzięki tej umowie. Ze 180 czołgów zamawianych dzisiaj w umowie wykonawczej, 64 będą już w spolonizowanej wersji. 3 pierwsze jeszcze wykonane w Republice Korei, ale kolejne 61 wykonanych tutaj. Nie byłoby to możliwe, gdyby nie strategiczne partnerstwo, które zawarliśmy z Koreą. Ono nie dotyczy tylko zakupu sprzętu, choć już tak dużo tego sprzętu działa w Polsce, ale to dotyczy również gwarancji wzajemnych relacji. Dzisiaj miałem okazję rozmawiać z panem ministrem, który objął swoją funkcję kilka tygodni temu i pierwszą swoją wizytę odbywa właśnie do Polski. Powiedział, że Republika Korei udzieli wszelkiego wsparcia Polsce, jeżeli kiedykolwiek zajdzie.
오늘의 서명식은 끝이 아니라 시작입니다. 앞으로도 대한민국은 폴란드의 든든한 안보의 파트너로서 폴란드의 어려움을 이해하고 동고동락을 바탕으로 해서 안보 협력을 넘어 모든 분야에 아낌없는 협력을.
Now we go back to our guest discussion with Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute, joins us live from Tokyo, Japan. Dr. Satoru, thank you for staying with us. Now, what's the connection between Poland, which is so far away, and South Korea working together for its defense and cooperating in such things?
Yeah, it is an interesting question. Indeed, South Korea takes charge to provide weapons in the Indo-Pacific, especially the American side country. For example, the Philippines, for example, the Vietnam, for example, the Indonesia. India also got some howitzers from the South Korea origin. So these countries, when we see the counter-China strategies, this country importing the weapon from the South Korea is good news. But when the Russia's aggression in Ukraine started, the European country also started plan to import a weapon from South Korea as a weapon provider in the western side countries. In case of Poland, indeed, European country sent a weapon to the Ukraine, and to fill the gap of their military, they need a western side weapon immediately. But American weapon is very expensive, and American weapon is providing many countries at the same time, means that view from the production capability, most countries cannot get American weapons so easily. This is competition now. So that's why they are seeking the alternative source of the western side country, which can use NATO standard ammunition. And in this case, South Korea is providing weapons to the Indo-Pacific, is one of the candidates for the European countries. So now Poland is very close proximity with Russia. So this Russia's threat is very big in Poland. Poland needs a weapon as soon as possible. In this case, they decide to buy the weapon from the South Korea, and South Korea start to provide it. And in case of Poland, indeed they need indeed massive amount of weapons just now. So that's why this is the only choice Poland can get. And from the South Korea, this is a good customer. But at the same time, their weapon is a little bit cost-effective weapons, because they have the know-how to provide a weapon to the many developing countries. And at the same time, so Poland is some certain level of development, of course, but at the same time, this is relatively cost-effective in the short span. Even if the short period, they can get many at the same time. So that's why this is a good choice.
Thank you, Dr. Satoru Nagao, for sharing that insight and joining us all the way from Japan. Thank you very much. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.